Hey everyone, Tin Man here, and the patch today changed quite a bit about Dota Underlords. From updated UI, performance optimization, to general gameplay updates, items and unit changes, and even some reworked alliances. They changed a lot. So let's break them down and discuss how each of them will impact your games. In the general section here, so they added a scoreboard bound to tab by default, and this will let you quickly scout out opposing lineups and alliances to know what they're running without looking at each board. So it's definitely a very welcome quality of life improvement. They also added leaderboards. And this is just on the Dota Underlords website, so let's click on that. It'll go up here. And it's kind of odd in that you need to rank up from Big Boss 5 and become the Lord of Whitespire to be ranked on the leaderboard. So they released a leaderboard with nobody on it. That's anticlimactic. I know a lot of players wanted to see a global ranking to see how they stacked up against everybody else in the world, but with how exclusive this current leaderboard is, that no one is currently on it, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be disappointed. Hopefully this gets more populated over time, and getting up above Big Boss 5 is not as impossible as it sounds right now. So let's see what else they've got. Hang on, there was a mini update literally as I'm recording this, so okay. Fix crash, fix Druid Alliance not updating, fix win-loss. Okay, so literally just some bug fixes. Okay, nothing that bad. So that was unexpected, literally in the time of recording this video. What else we've got? We've got this change here is another exciting one. Hero stat changes from basic items is now shown during combat as well as during preparing. Previously, you could put items on and they wouldn't update exactly what was changing about them. So this is a nice little way of seeing a little more clarity on what's going on. There's also a bunch of other UI and mobile performance optimizations. So definitely welcome changes there. So on to the gameplay updates. Fixed Demon Hunters. Oh, Demon Hunters were apparently not working. So that's interesting. Definitely a buff to Terrorblade and Anti-Mage. You know, actually doing what they say they do, so that's nice. Techies will plant the bomb in the wrong location, so I presume now he's going to plant it forward rather than backwards. So this should definitely be a big buff to Techies. He will deal quite a bit more damage and should be a welcome addition to any lineup, especially when you get him to 2-star. Fix some pathing issues, it's always good. And some changes here to the tier odds. When you're at level 9 or level 11, level 11 can only be reached using the higher class of criminal item. So they decreased the odds of 2 cost units and increased the odds of 3 cost units, as well as nerfed the odds of tier 5. The tier 5 odds went from 15% down to 12%, and the 3% went into tier 1 odds. So it's definitely a nerf to higher class of criminal, which was one of my favorite items, allowing you to get a lot of 2-star 5 cost units. So this will bring that down ever so slightly, but really this shouldn't be a massive gameplay impact. And a little bit of a blurb here about the last round will last an extra second. Give a chance to force a draw. Oh, okay. So this means whenever like 2 auto attacks are flying in the air at the same time, it's not like whoever's lands first and then instantly everyone becomes immune. It's kind of more like current Dota auto chess where the fights don't end until a second later, so there's a chance of a draw. So that's fine. So another big change here is the reworked win and loss streaks. So longer loss streaks are now much worse. They cap out at 2 gold instead of the +3 from before. There's also a nerf to a silver lining item later on, and that makes losing streak strategies early on a lot worse, especially open fort strategies, which want to have a losing streak until round 15 or 17. It's probably for the better, though, as it will discourage the non-interactive losing streaks, where players basically don't play the game for the first 15 rounds. Win streaks were also adjusted here. They now cap out at 4 gold for 8 wins, but they reset after those 8, resetting down to 0 gold win streak. So it definitely prevents the rich from getting richer. You'll have a very limited amount of gold that you can rack up. So on the whole, I think both of these changes should make for much closer games. Players will be less inclined to go for a long early loss streak, and the top players will not get crazy amounts of gold for long win streaks. The early to mid game should definitely be a lot more evenly contested across all players now. Item changes. Force Staff, a new tier 3 support item, which pushes an enemy in a random direction 6 cells. So this can potentially pull key units out of a corner formation, break up the Knights Alliance, or even send main tank units to the back like Kunkka or Pudge. It can definitely make some big plays, but with how random it is, I think on average it's probably going to be pretty lackluster. Sight the Vise, a tier 4 support item. When equipped, hero takes damage, transform the offending unit into a pig for 4 seconds on a 15-second cooldown. This seems kind of weak to me, especially with how powerful all the other tier 4 items are. Like, this is one polymorph for 4 seconds. Fights don't generally last for 15 seconds. Okay, maybe you'd get 2 activations off of this, but still I'd rather have a Daedalus or a Moonshard or a Maelstrom over it. It can be an answer to something like Kunkka or Tidehunter, who is going to immediately attack as soon as the fight starts. So you put this on the front line or right in front of them, and you have yourself kind of a build your own anti-mage where you can stop them from casting for a couple key seconds at the start. But other than that, I think this is pretty limited in its usefulness. Big Time Contract, a tier 2 support item. Equipped unit is bloodbound in addition to its other types. So this is actually a really interesting item. It can make a crazy combination when you put it on something like a Dragon Knight or a Troll Warlord or other big damage carry. And once another Bloodbound, like Warlock or Ogre Magi die, then your main damage dealer gets 100% damage increase. Is that worth giving up other items, since obviously you can only have one item per unit? Something like Mask of Madness or Daedalus? I'm not sure, but in the late game it certainly can be if you can get 1 or even 2 activations off with Warlock and Ogre Magi dying before your Troll Warlord or Dragon Knight who has this item. I also reworked some items here. Silver Lining, which I kind of alluded to before, it now gains a charge when you win a fight, and then when you lose a fight, it will lose a charge and you get a gold. So it's definitely a significant nerf to this item, which is fair. I thought this encouraged bad gameplay patterns. Basically, if I saw this in my opening 3 rounds, I would just commit to a losing streak strategy, an open fort strategy where I don't play the game for the first 13-ish rounds. And I think that was a very unhealthy gameplay pattern, so I'm glad to see it nerfed. It's probably one of the worst items now, since you need to kind of alternate wins and losses to get maximum benefit from it, which prevents you from getting any win or loss streak. So I generally don't think this is a very good item now. Shaman Pluck, chance increased from 5 to 17%. And this is definitely a good change because it was one of the weakest items before. And some of the changes to Shaman, which we'll discuss in a moment here, might encourage a more Shaman-heavy meta. Blink Dagger now generates 50 mana when activated and reduced from 60 seconds to 15 seconds. So definitely a big buff to Blink Dagger. And it should make it a lot more viable on some of the important units where their main value is in their ability, such as Kunkka, Tidehunter, Disruptor, Techies, and units like that. So definitely a higher tier item now. Tooth and Claw, one of my favorite items, that allows the Savages to stack a bleed. This is a very good item, even with just 1, and now that it stacks, when you get 2 of them, it'll stack 20 damage per second bleeds, which will dramatically increase its effectiveness. And Coordinated Assault is now actually working. That was a known bug that it just literally didn't do anything. It did not give any plus attack speed to anybody next to anything. It was completely not working. So this should definitely make Trolls they have a global item now, and it should make Trolls a much more viable alternative to Dragons in the Knight strategy. So Trolls and Knights should be a top tier strategy now that Coordinated Assault actually works. Hero changes. Medusa's Split Shot now applies item effects on secondary shots. So this mainly is important for the item Eye of Scotty, which should now slow all 3 targets that Medusa hits. It previously looked like the effect was on all 3 shots, and I know in one of my previous videos I said it slowed. That was not true. It was just a visual bug that kind of tricked me into thinking it worked. And so this is definitely a buff to Medusa, who was already top tier, so you should keep on picking Medusa highly and put Eye of Scotty on her any chance you get. Lycan's ultimate, Summon Wolves, now correctly applies health buff. Should improve Lycan a little bit, but you're generally picking up Lycan because you want the beast buff and the warrior buff and the human buff. The amount of health or damage Lycan does is not a big as appeal as the alliances that he provides, but hey, any buff is good. Venomancer, his plague wards have kind of been reworked. He got a little health increase, about 10% buff. And his Plague Wards now spawn 1, 2, and 4 Plague Wards at 1, 2, and 3 star. But the wards are always rank 1, so they're always the weaker Plague Wards. Looks like the cast speed increased and the cooldown increased over time, or over the levels. And importantly, most important here is this last line. Wards now have 50% magic resistance. So this should prevent them from just instantly dying to something like random Kunkka Boat or just AoE magic damage, because a lot of times the wards will just pop up and then instantly fall down. So this magic resist is definitely a good buff. I think we'll start to see Venomancer come back into the meta a little bit. He'll definitely be a more viable option for Savages and Warlocks. Disruptor, big buff. So now Disruptor went from being just a Brawny Shaman to a Brawny Shaman and a Warlock, which is important for the Warlock changes we'll discuss in a moment. Static Storm also binds targets inside the cloud for a 25% miss chance. So just a straight up buff. Now instead of silencing them, it silences and makes them potentially miss their attacks, reducing their mana gain. So, you know, Disruptor was already a reasonably good unit. Now it's going to be probably a top tier unit for sure. Warlock, the unit, his ability now has a faster cast, lower cooldown, dramatically lower, only 6 seconds as opposed to 20, but substantially less damage and heal and duration. So this will tie into the Warlock and Shaman changes we talk about here in a second. Well, actually right now. Warlock changes. Now reads, whenever Warlock casts a spell, they form a link with the ally who has the lowest health for 3 seconds. When either linked hero deals damage, both units are now healed for 50, 100, 150% of the damage dealt at 2, 4, and 6 Warlocks. It used to give just a flat lifesteal amount, 15, 30, 45, I think it was, at 2, 4, 6 Warlocks. And so this is, I think it's a nerf. I definitely think it's a nerf. You get like a big 50% heal, but only on 2 units and only after a spell gets cast, which kind of encourages you to play low or quick casting, low cooldown, quick casting Warlocks, which is why Warlock was changed to 6 seconds as opposed to 20. So definitely think that it will still be viable. Warlocks should still be viable in the compositions where they were present before, such as Knights and Warriors, mainly because those units have defensive capabilities, extra armor, or the Knight's damage reduction, which makes healing much more effective on them. So I still think this will be viable, although I do think it's a little bit weaker, which is probably for the best because Warlocks were arguably the best or second best synergy before because they just went into everything. Shamans now got a substantial rework. Now requires 3 Shamans up from 2, which is, there's only 3 Shamans in the game, Disruptor, Arc Warden, and Shadow Shaman. So now you need all 3 to trigger their effect. They no longer hex enemies right away, and instead all enemies who are affected by hexes, silences, or stuns will generate negative 200% mana. So they will lose mana when they are attacked and damaged. This is a pretty big change. I hesitate to call it a buff or nerf because now that you require 3 Shamans, I just don't see this coming up very often, right? Disruptor's a good one, and Shadow Shaman gets played in troll builds, but now you have to throw an Arc Warden who like is a build around me kind of unit that doesn't really fit into the troll build. It doesn't really fit into any kind of Disruptor build, and he doesn't hex or silence or stun on his own like Shadow Shaman and Disruptor do. So I just don't think this is going to be activated very much. But if it does get activated, it makes all of the best units so much better. Disruptor, obviously now if they're in their storm, they're going to lose mana from being attacked and the damage from the storm. Whenever Kunkka uses his boat, everybody who's stunned is going to lose mana as they get attacked while stunned. Same with Medusa and Tidehunter. All of the best AoE CC effects now just got a lot better if you activate the Shaman buff, which I don't know that it will be activated all that often. So, what a patch. That is probably the biggest patch they've introduced yet for Dota Underlords. And I'm definitely looking forward to trying to get on the leaderboard as soon as possible, as well as experiment with a lot of these changes. Make sure you like and subscribe so you can keep up to date with all of my awesome Dota Underlords content, and you can check out my previous strategy guides as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.